edit it. Okay. Hey, welcome everybody here in the centre, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you see this. What's the date today? 7th? 9th, 9/11. Very significant date in the history of humanity. And also I'm here talking about this, so very significant as well. Welcome to Tea with Mo. Lectures on non-duality. Are they lectures? Are they on non-duality? Possibly. I think because it's happening, then yes it is. Today I'd like to bring to you a topic that sits in a non-dual space because it transcends time and space and the dualistic matrix thinking paradigm that we have in relation to this life, this birth, death experience, and the polarity and duality of the mind-body having this experience, and it being very real and being very visceral, and sometimes we can get caught up in that this experience is absolute truth rather than relative truth. And the relativity of it is that it will come and it will go, and it's relative to this moment. Your experience is relative to this moment. There's a whole lot of variables and parameters that are adding to this experience, and all of those variables and parameters have come into existence in one moment. And then you have your experience and you go, oh, this is my truth, this is my experience, when in actual fact this moment shall pass, and then there'll be another group of variables and parameters that then create and shape another experience. And then you'll say, oh, this is true. 12 hours later, you might think a completely different way and go, hang on, my truth 12 hours before was very different to my truth now. Maybe I'm a different version of myself. So in these discussions, I like to present a perception, a point of reference, a space to consider from, to see something that might, well, definitely does sit outside of the mainstream paradigm of a lifetime that is, in a sense, sequential. So what I'd like to talk to you today about is a concept called pre-birthing planning, and I was just moving through YouTube as I do, and there's a lady that I follow, Dorothy Shelton. She's got a really beautiful voice, and for some of you who've seen the video that I then shared, she's the one who speaks of it, and she's the interviewer. And she was interviewing, not Richard Schwartz, what's the other guy's name? Derek Schwartz. And Derek Schwartz is I'm not too sure if he's a psychologist, counsellor, but what he does is he does hypnosis, but it's between lives hypnotherapy. So he does past life regression, and so you can go into a deep state and then experience past lives. And then what he found is that people, as they moved through past lives, there would be an ending point to that life, and there was this theme that was coming from the learnings that were happening for these people when they ended their life. And then they also found that there was this gap in between, and let's just call it a gap by using words, a gap in between, where there was in a sense, a reconciliation of what this life meant and what lessons there were, and did I achieve them, and things like this. And then this question of, okay, would you like to return? And it was interesting because there's a question rather than a, rightio, you didn't get that sorted out, in you go again. So there was this suggestion, and once again, I'd just like to share what I found, and then what I also found within me as I found something from something else. And tonight, I just reflect on what arises for you from what you find from my findings. That's all this is, really. You know, oh yeah, that resonates with me, or no, that doesn't make any sense. You know, I've got these other particular beliefs. Remember, beliefs. So what he found in these regression therapies and sessions was there was a theme that was happening for a lot of people, and then he started to compile these themes and categories, and then you know, wrote books about it and used people as examples. And he had you know, he was hypnotizing people, and he also had access to people who would channel other people's higher selves, and they also call them your wisdom council. So your wisdom council is a group of non-physical entities that is a part of your pre-planning. And so you sit down. I don't know if you sit down, float, whatever it is that, you know, I'm not too sure if you still have a body, but you have a discussion around creating what the next life looks like. And we've had many conversations about free will versus predeterminism, and ultimately we came up to the paradox that they both exist. So whenever I find a paradox that they both exist, then I find a spiritual truth, that there is both free will and predeterminism. And I like this concept because it suggests that there is some predeterminism and yet there's still free will. So notice what's arising for you. See what happens. So what they found within it, and this concept of reincarnation first to begin with, and then second is that once I've had this life, can I return? Will I return? Do I have to return? And what they found was that reincarnation is voluntary. Like, you choose to reincarnate. It's not like, oh, you know, I've signed up for 7 rounds and now I've got to go through, or 84 rounds, or, you know, the Buddhists will call it the Wheel of 84. You know, they actually give it a name. Not that you've got 84 lives to become enlightened, it's just they give it an actual name and a number. So reincarnation was voluntary. From a non-physical perspective, potentially higher self. Now, higher self is an interesting, it's a loaded word too, because it sort of suggests that there is this higher self and this is the lower self. There's other words, the oversoul. So the oversoul could be a larger vessel that contains many fractals of itself, and you are one of those. So this experience is one of those fractals. And those fractals can be spread out through time and space and dimensions. Right, so that oversoul, in a sense, has multiple experiences in multiple dimensions, in multiple parts of the universe, in multiple experiences and multiple timelines, all happening at once. And all of that information that's being experienced by the fractals feeds into the oversoul. The oversoul has this accumulative experience, and that accumulative experience is then fed into a greater being. And so this is how the greater being gets to know itself. So this is the concept of oneness, is that we are all fractals of one. And because we're fractals of that one, then we hold the same capability as the one that we're fractals of. That's what being a fractal is. The example is if I get a candle, and I have one candle and I have 2 other or 3 other candles, and I've got this one light, and it's burning. Each one of those other candles that I then put in there, it's the same light, but now it's separated. So now it's an individual unit of light versus this one light, but it still comes from that. So imagine that fractalized infinitely throughout the universe, and maybe even multiverses. Like, it's pretty big, way too large for the mind to actually get a grasp of. And yet that's what non-dualism, that's where we go. So it's quite easy to talk about many concepts: aliens, star seeds, you know, space travel, wormholes, vortexes, pixies, fairies, monsters. The whole lot's there. Yeah. This is just another portion of it. And here is, in a sense, a jigsaw piece that might fit in your puzzle. And it may not. And you go, that doesn't fit anywhere in this view of my life or my world that I'm creating, that you are creating, because this is your creation. Yeah? So your creation gets fed into the larger creation, and even when we look at that from a perspective of human consciousness, the collective consciousness, even if we look at this room, your experience right here, right now, we're quantumly entangled into it, and we're all part of it. Yeah. So then we go out to a wider community, Townsville, Queensland, Australia, the world. Like there's this accumulative consciousness that it's an energetical experience, and we're tapping into it. It's because we are it. We're not separated from it. So bringing this back to this pre-birthing plan is that reincarnation is voluntary. That when you are in a non-physical form, you recognise how very short this life was. We seem to get caught up in that this 80 years, 100 years is a long time because of in a sense, the psychological suffering that occurs on this planet in this 3D matrix, in a sense. This is a very dense form of existence for soul, for non-physical beings to come into. It's a dense body. When we create things, through the law of attraction, through vibration, it takes time. We can instantly manifest things. However, most of the time that we manifest things, it takes time. So we don't see that, in a sense, that we're connected to what's actually being placed upon our path because of the lag in time. You might have a thought, 3 weeks ago, 3 months ago, 3 years ago, that then gets placed upon your path. And you go, I had a thought similar to that, but that was a really long time ago. That's a long time. Maybe they're not connected. Whereas if I thought about something now, if I thought about changing the colour of this water to red, and it changed to red, then we'd go, oh wow, that was related to it because of the time that passes. Yeah. Whereas if I have this thought that water will change to red, and 3 weeks down the track I come across a glass of water that's red in colour, I may not actually relate it to this actual time because that time has passed and a lot of time has passed. So we look at time in a different way because, remember too, time is relative. So Einstein said time is relative. Relative to what? It's relative to space. You are 99.9% space. So time is relative to you and the vibrationary rate that your space is representing. So if you're pressured and rushed, then time seems to get condensed and confined, and I need to get to the centre as quick as I can. Now I need to hop on a scooter, otherwise I'll miss it. So see how when I get pressured, then time, and I'm checking my clock, or checking my watch. Whereas time, sometimes time flies when you're having fun, and sometimes time can be really warped. I had a conversation this morning, and I swear I was talking for 40 minutes, and when I looked at the clock, it was on 12 minutes. Wow, that's interesting. I said to myself, time is just warped. Okay. So when we're after this life, before this life, if we're looking at it from a sequential perspective, we start to realise that this existence is very short. Now, even for me, and I've noticed the older that I get, the years seem to get shorter. I don't know if that's an actual thing that's happening, or is that my perception. However, that's my experience, and that experience seems to be quite familiar with other people when I say those words. That feels right to me, or yeah, that's very similar. Yeah. So when we start to recognise that, we come back into this non-physical and go, whoa, what happened in that life? And this is what I learnt, and this is what I set out to do. How did I go? You then start to realise that, it's only a short trip down there, in there, wherever this is. So the other thing too is that you come to the realisation that no one gets harmed. I found this really comforting. That when we look at the news, mainstream media, there's so much harm that's happening upon the planet. Yeah. When we start to think of our lives and some of the emotions that we feel and the relationships that we have, there seems to be a lot of harm that is happening. You're either being harmed or you're harming somebody, and it's not that it's out physical harm and you're stabbing people with knives. It's just, it's some of the words that we use, some of the looks that we give people, how we receive them. So there could be, in a sense, this perception that there's so much harm that's happening. Yeah? And even consider throughout your day or even throughout your week. Actually, this week would be a really good one to reflect on, with the full moon and then the moon eclipse, because it's showing the darkness. The interesting thing around the eclipse was that the Earth moved in front of, or in between, the sun and the moon. So you actually saw the moon for what it was, because the moon doesn't have its own light source. It only reflects the light of the sun. So you could see the shadow, you could see the darkness that the moon actually represents. The moon is, in a sense, doesn't have life. The moon doesn't give life to anything. The sun gives life to things. So for some people, it gave people the opportunity to see the darkness, the part that, in a sense, it showed you what you're not. Yeah. Maybe brought up those negative cognitions that I'm not enough, or I'm always doing something wrong, I shouldn't speak out. That there would have been a lot of potential for a lot of shadow to come up. And where there's shadow, there's harm. Yeah. So imagine if you realise that this life, as much as these experiences are very real and we feel them viscerally, we feel them bodily, emotionally, psychologically, and potentially spiritually, that there is no harm that actually happens to anybody. So let me introduce another beautiful little line, because I like to use triangulation in these methods. In A Course of Miracles, it says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Therein lies the peace of God. So I'm going to say that again. Nothing real can be threatened. So when we're looking for absolute truth, if we're looking for absolute love, unconditional love, there's no threatening with that. So the reality is everything that is not threatened. So nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. So the only thing that actually exists is something that can't be threatened. If it's being threatened, it is unreal. Now, that doesn't mean to say that your experience is not real on this planet, because it's very real. From a relative perspective, from an absolute perspective, it is not real, because it's not you and it doesn't represent you. It represents an experience that you are having. Now, words are really important on this earth plane, because words create space. They create. There's a frequency to words, and those words can also activate emotion. Emotion has frequency. So each and every moment you are creating. So you are both receiving data and information, which is then being created into a form of frequency, and then you are transmitting it. In each and every moment, you are a receiver and a transmitter. And this action is creating. This is what you're doing each and every day. In these moments, you're receiving information, and then you're transmitting it in relation to your frequency. So, reincarnation is voluntary. No one gets hurt here. No one actually gets hurt here. This is the ultimate virtual reality game. All right? My son sits on COD and kills probably about 30,000 people each year. Is there anyone getting hurt on there? No. Now, I don't want him killing people online because that's still something that is being placed upon the field. However, we seem to understand that, hey, I can just switch that off, come back, get some dinner, go out with mates, play, all that sort of stuff, come back tomorrow and I'll go online with the other group of people who are sitting in other areas of the world, and we're going to meet on a holographic sense in a screen, in a simulation, and we're going to think that this is real. And then we're going to die and we're going to get reborn and we're going to spawn again. Yeah? So when we start to look at the technology that we have, the realization is the technology that we have is actually a reflection of the technology that we are. See? So we're getting to see what we are through the technology that we create. So it's voluntary. No one needs to play the game. But you play the game for a reason. It's only for a short period of time in the life of a soul. No one actually gets hurt. And whatever you find here from a learning perspective, you get to keep. From a soul's perspective, all of this learning that you've come here and that you are receiving and that you're sharing, you get to keep that. That's part of what you bring back. So that sounds pretty groovy. Let me sign up again. Yeah. So I thought that was, so when I'm also thinking from a dual lens, a dualistic lens. Now remember, everything that I say to you are words that can impact you in particular ways. Your system, your mind body will see this as data, and it will originally see it as, is this a threat or an opportunity? Now, if this doesn't align with you, you may see it as a threat and then you'll push it away. And that's okay. However, if it aligns with you a little bit, you might see it as an opportunity. I've come here to learn, I'm really open to this, oh, that resonates with me. And so then you allow it into your psyche. Now, as you allow it into your psyche, it then becomes part of your belief system. So remember, Henry Ford said, whether you believe you're right or you're wrong, you're always right. You will find evidence to prove yourself right about what you believe about self and others. All right? So this world, your worldview, what you believe as your reality, is based upon your belief system. Yeah? Your belief system creates platforms of possibility and probability. Yeah? Good old, what was his name? Tony Robbins, he said that beliefs are possibility filters. They filter out the possibility of what could then become probable. Now, I do believe that I will come across a glass of water that is red. It's not going to be wine, it's not going to be soft drink, it's actually going to be red water. Okay? Now, because I believe that, I'm more likely to find it. Whether I go looking for it, doesn't matter. Because if I'm consciously looking for it or I'm unconsciously looking for it, I've got a greater probability of finding it. Esther and Abraham Hicks, they say life is a possibility-probability vortex. There's possibility and probability. For something to be possible, I need to allow it into my system to be, I could entertain that thought. Now it's possible. Wacko. And then from there on, how much attention you then give to it. So here's possibilities, 5 possibilities. If I put most of my attention on this possibility, I'm going to increase the probability of it. And this is how things are manifest. This is how energy creates something in a matter form, in a form of matter. And this is how creation happens on this planet. Pretty much in the whole universe. However, on this planet, that's how it's set out. That's if you want to believe that. If you do believe it, the world is your oyster. So, reincarnation's voluntary, no one gets harmed, you get to keep what you learn, and it's a very short experience in relation to soul's life. I thought that's pretty groovy. Now, 5 reasons for reincarnation. So there was, and the reason why I'm bringing this to you is because when I found this information, I noticed that my nervous system eased. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. This information has a direct impact on how I feel about myself, which then also impacts how I feel about being here in my life, experiencing these things that I'm actually experiencing now. That's pretty profound. What is it about these words that did that? And so that's why I then started to look into it a little bit more. Yeah? And I'm going to share the video with people, and I'll put it at the end of this video. So the 5 reasons that that Derek Schwartz found within these different sessions was 5 reasons for reincarnation. Because remember, it's voluntary. Balancing and releasing karma. Yeah, we've heard that one before. Yeah, that's why you get but we didn't really think that you had a choice, or not necessarily. We didn't think. Some suggestions that you didn't have a choice. So you're balancing and you're releasing karma. Now, once again, I'm just saying what has been said here. I have different views around karma. I think karma is actually a belief that's been created to make you feel bad about yourself. Yeah. So that's something different. And the reason why I say that is because this is what they're saying in this sort of contradicts this concept of releasing karma. Let me get to that. Experiencing contrast. So when we say experiencing contrast, from this perspective, when you are in the non-physical form in your light body, you don't necessarily see, you may not necessarily see yourself as you are, because you don't see yourself as what you're not. All right. The example that they use is that, and it comes from conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh, I think it was saying that, God, or the essence of you. Imagine if the essence of you is white light, and that white light is in a room that's white, and all the furniture is white. So everything in the room's white. You can't actually differentiate what is the parameters of the room, what is the furniture in the room, and what you are. So what you then do is you place yourself into a situation where you're not white. And you have an experience when you're not white. You could be a colour, you could be a shape, you could be a form. You could take on an identity. And so you have this, in a sense, lived experience of something that is not what you are. So when you return to what you are, you then go, wow, I thought I was that. I thought I was this, doing this, saying this, in this place. And really, I wasn't that. Thank you for the experience, because now I can see what I'm not. So, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. Therein lies the peace of God. Here we come into the unrealness, because we feel threatened. We think that we're harming people. We're thinking people harm us. And this is where the karma concept is, that, oh, well, karma is that you've done this, so you need to balance that out. Hang on. Now, there might be a thing called karma, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a non-judgmental karma. See how there seems to be judgment that's placed on karma? Oh, you've got to go and repay that debt, buddy. Yeah. So if there was a judgment placed on karma, then maybe we could release it from that perspective. So experiencing contrast, balancing and releasing karma, experiencing contrast. Sometimes we come back for service to others. Classic in Buddhist terms, adepts learning, in a sense, to gain enlightenment, become enlightened, or remember that that's what they are. And so they, when an adept in Buddhism attains enlightenment, that person has reached Buddhahood. So it's this this essence. So you reach this Buddhahood, and then you get a choice. So when you become enlightened, and while you're still living, you have the choice of either becoming a bodhicitta or a bodhisattva. So the bodhicitta is the one who, after it transitions in this life, it continues to explore the other dimensions and planes of existence in further becoming more enlightened. So this is in a sense, there's a service to others as it continues to expand into the layers of consciousness, becoming more and more enlightened to what it is. Yeah? So the bodhicitta will continue to move through these planes of existence. The bodhisattva chooses to return into this plane of existence to then shine the light to help others get to that space of enlightenment. So that's a classic way of service to others, return for reincarnation. From other perspectives too, there is star seeds, so you'll have different fractals of the one that have been coming from different planetary systems, different constellations, who are coming into the planet and who are of a higher density and a higher dimensions that we actually are here. And what they are, their purpose is to come onto the planet and lift the consciousness of the planet from the inside out. Okay. So they will be beacons of light. And we find many adepts being brought into this life. There's the indigo children. I would even suggest that probably most of the people on the autism spectrum are also carriers of light. There's been some channelings from a group of autistic people, and the way that they describe themselves is they chose to be lightly reincarnated so they did not lose their connection to Source. So they chose to come into a body that they were not fully embodied in. And the way that they explain their experience is that noise is harmful to them, touch is harmful to them, and so they struggle to actually embody into the full embodiment because they're lightly incarnated, because their point of attention is actually closer to Source. However, in that, part of their lesson is to embody. Yeah. So, once again, information, see how it sits and feels with you. So, service to others. And in saying that, there's quite a few people in this room, I believe, are part of that. Okay. Correcting false beliefs about self. So this concept talks about that when we come into this experience, what we do is we come to play in the mud, except sometimes we get stuck in the mud, and the mud sticks to us. And then when we slip on out of here, there's still a bit of mud sticking to us. So we don't actually clean ourselves. We don't resolve all of the negative cognitions that we have. So negative cognitions, negative beliefs about self. I'm not enough, I'm afraid of being alone, shame, guilt, I'm the perpetrator, I betrayed people, whatever it is. Yeah? So you have these negative cognitions about self. And this is where the shadow work, this is the work that we do, we're clearing the channel, we're getting to that 0 point, we're just noticing these things. And if we can clear those channels the best that we can before we step out of this life, then we don't necessarily have to potentially come back and clear those channels again. Yeah? And the last one is for healing. Now, healing in many ways, and they didn't really go into that as well. So for me, correcting false beliefs about self, I chose to come into a family. I was an only child. I was born in another country. I moved to this country here. I experienced a lot of racial prejudice in my formative years, which created negative cognitions about self. And one of my big negative cognitions was, I'm different and that's not okay. Yeah, because I really wanted to be connected to people. So as that negative cognition was created, I then developed a safety mechanism, and if we look at it from an internal family system, psychotherapy, parts perspective, I created a part of me that was really good at people pleasing. And when I became the people pleaser, I then started to realise that people liked me, or they wanted me to stick around because they could see that I had value, or there was value in what I did. Yeah. So the value that I derived for myself was the value that I was giving to others, and what I wanted to do was then stay connected. Now, as a result of that, people pleasing, yeah, it can work for a little while, but it's probably really not sustainable, because where there's people pleasing, there's also resentment. Yeah, resentment to others, and more so resentment to self. Okay. So it's no random act that this happened. It's because that was part of my pre-birth planning. Hey, you're going to go into this world, you're going to be born into this family who are going to be going into these areas, and these are parts of the experiences that you will have. Now, part of the pre-birth planning is that you will sit with another person's higher self. So think about it, you know, all of those people that have done you wrong, that you perceive have done you wrong, whenever that happened, even though you might have resolved it now, at the time you thought that they did you wrong, all of those people, their higher selves and your higher self had an agreement bonded in love, unconditional love, to go, I will be that for you. I will be the betrayer for you. I will be the perpetrator for you. I will be the bully for you. So you can experience this. And this is your agreement. Now, this is very controversial because this goes into very dark places. And once again, this is what this group of people are saying. It may resonate with you, and it may not, and it may challenge you. So once again, notice your arisings, okay? Because this is your experience. So, you know, the example that they use is that within intimate relationships, there was one soul who said, you know, I want to connect with this other soul, and we're going to come together and have a relationship and have children and whatever that is, you know. The thing that I will, so there'll be a sign in a sense that I will remember that will attract my attention is that the lady would be wearing a red polka dot dress. And so all of a sudden, this then becomes a remembering, and the human or the then gets attracted to that and goes, there's something about this woman, and it's already been in a sense pre-planned. Okay. Now, in saying that, you have free will. Yeah. And also saying that what they talk about within the pre-planning is that there's not one plan. It's not plan A. And well, if that goes a bit left, we've got plan B. It's an infinite number of plans, okay? Right. Now, the other thing about this too is that sometimes we can get caught up in time as being linear. Oh, it's pre-birth planning, so that happened in the past. How could you actually create all of those things that were going to happen in the future? So when we start to look at non-duality, past, present and future are all simultaneously existing. It's not, it is sequential, it's linear in process, but it's also happening right here and now. So what you need next week in relation to what's happening now, you're already pre-planning that with another person's higher self in this moment. But it's still pre-planning, and this moment is also reflective of the moment before you came in here. See, it's a bit hard for the mind to go, oh, come on, Maurice, I find it a real challenge that we're going to sit down before we get here and we're going to pre-plan all of this stuff. And I've got free will that moves me in and out of that stuff. How does that actually work? You go, well, yeah, if we look at it from that one point of perspective, that time is linear, that takes a lot of odds coming together, a lot of planets aligning, a lot of synchronicity, a lot of coincidence, you know, all of that sort of stuff for it to happen. However, if we then start to entertain the thought that there is past, a present and a future within our linear process of understanding this life, and also having an understanding that it's all happening simultaneously. Everything's happening simultaneously. There's only ever one moment, and it's called now. You're never out of the now. So we could say that you and I are here now listening to this, and we could also say that you and I, our higher selves, are here prior to us ever being born. And it's all happening in the same moment. See how the mind really struggles with that? Yeah. So that's why I'm just saying it, because it encapsulates all of that and everything in between. Because that's non-dual. Yeah. This mind, the beautiful mind that it is, it still has the challenges to grasp this. And I'm also using words which really limit it. You know, and I'm doing the best that I can to bring you to this, in a sense, awareness. How are we going for time? Beautiful. All right. Just want to finish this off with the psychological benefits and the pitfalls of this as well, because I think this is important to talk about. The benefits of it is that it decreases the judgment, the self-judgment of our own negative cognitions. I'm a bad person, I betrayed that person, I stole, I'm a thief, I'm an adulterer, I'm a bully, you know, I'm an abuser, or I'll never be enough for that person. You know, so these negative cognitions that we have are based around our experiences of what we think we are in a dualistic perspective. Because ultimately in life, because there's so much that happens, we will be both the victim and the perpetrator in so many experiences. Yeah. So when we are the victim, we will have a negative cognition. When we are the perpetrator, we'll have a negative cognition. And we are both victim and perpetrator in some experiences. So we've got both negative cognitions from those. Yeah? When you start to see that everything is actually planned out, that nobody actually gets harmed, that you are consciousness having a human experience, and you are here to learn, you are here to help others, you are here to balance karmic debts, maybe, yeah? And you're here for healing, then you might start to then recognize that, shit, if I'm here for that, then maybe everyone else is. And maybe everyone else's higher self is in on the game. And we're not, because we come in with the veil of forgetting. And we come in with the veil of forgetting so we can have an authentic experience, so we think that this is real. Yeah? Now, the flip side of this is that if we don't think that it's real, then we can bypass the experience. And we can also not take responsibility for our actions towards others. You know, oh no, it's just, well, you know, I'm the villain in this circumstance because you and I agreed upon that. Sorry, I'm going to betray you because our higher self said it was okay. Yeah? So it's a double-edged sword. So there's benefits to it and there's pitfalls to it. Yeah? But once again, notice the perspective that you are coming from in relation to the benefit or the pitfall. Because nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists. So if you're coming from a space of love, then that is the closest to true reality that we can touch. Yeah? And that is love without conditions. So love without conditions comes from a place where it's not threatened. It's love. If one is coming from a place that is threatened, that is fear-based, then we're coming from an unrealness, a relative unrealness. Yeah. So just notice how that sits with you. there's so much more to this, and I've downloaded a couple of books, and it talks about people's relationships. You know, for me, I came into this world, in a sense, feeling alone and different, and that's not okay. Learning to want to. So what that did, it forced me. Did it force me? It gave me the catalyst to want to be a part of something. So to be a part of something, I then learnt a particular group of behaviours to connect me to people. So connection was important. However, that connection was based on safety. If I'm connected, I feel safe. See, it's still coming from fear, because I wasn't coming from a state of safety already. So I talk about there's a difference. Connection is different to union. When you create union with another, you are already safe. It's not that I need to be connected to another for me to feel safe. So I was placed in an experience where I didn't feel safe, and I needed to feel safe by being connected to others, and the people pleasing was the mechanism of that. Now, when you people please, you give away your power. So in this lifetime, I've learnt I'm here to regain my power. Well, what does that mean, Maurice? What is regaining your power? Well, where does your power come from? Well, I am. That's where it comes from. So for me, it was to remember that I am. Yeah. So I can then start to look at the full range of experiences that I've had up until this moment, to recognize that all of this was a recognition of I am. But I needed to go there. It's the hero's journey. You go out, you have your experiences, you find all this stuff, integrate it, come back, it's wisdom, and then what do? You then share it. And then you pop out the other side. And then you go, right, how'd I go? What's next? Do I return to the higher densities where I originally came from? Do I go back onto the spaceship, which I've been hanging out on? Do I go back to the planets? What is it? Or do I come back in here and then become service to others again? Yeah. So see how that fits with you. You know, have you had experiences that you could maybe relate to as a past life? Do you know what potential contracts and agreements that you have with others in this lifetime? Could you look at how you have been betrayed and been the betrayer? Can you see how you've been the victim as well as the perpetrator? And could you see that there maybe is a cosmic dance that's actually happening? Or is just this a crock of shit? All of the above, depending on your perspective. Yeah. So I'll sign out to these beautiful people online, and